The little girl stood alone beneath the bright afternoon sun, holding an old violin that looked almost as tired as she did. Around her, wealthy guests laughed, cameras flashed, and a grand garden party continued as if nothing important was happening. Then a powerful millionaire noticed her standing near the fountain and made a careless joke that would change both their lives forever. He pointed toward the violin and said with a mocking smile, "Play something impressive, and maybe I'll adopt you." People around him laughed. The little girl lowered her eyes, tightened her fingers around the worn instrument, and quietly walked toward the small wooden stage. Nobody expected what happened next. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can give people a second chance, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories of courage, compassion, and second chances. The garden belonged to Adrian Vale, a 48-year-old millionaire whose name appeared regularly in business magazines. He had built his fortune through technology companies, luxury hotels, and investments that seemed to multiply every year. His mansion stood behind tall iron gates, surrounded by perfectly trimmed gardens, fountains, white stone pathways, and enormous trees that offered shade from the afternoon heat. That day, Adrian was hosting a charity gathering for local children. Hundreds of important guests had arrived, dressed in expensive clothes and speaking about generosity while waiters carried trays of food between them. Adrian smiled for photographs, shook hands with politicians and business owners, and accepted compliments as though he had been born for that world. Yet behind the mansion, near a service entrance, stood a little girl named Elara Finch. She was only 9 years old. Her faded blue dress had been carefully washed and repaired at the sleeves. Her dark brown hair was tied into 2 simple braids, and her shoes were slightly too large. She lived at a small community children's home several miles away. Elara had been invited because the charity organization that supported her home had been given a small booth at the event. She was supposed to help display handmade crafts made by the children. But Elara had brought something else with her. A violin. It had belonged to an elderly music teacher named Mrs. Maribel Rowan, who had taught Elara during free afternoon lessons at the children's home. The instrument was old, scratched, and missing some of its original shine, but Elara treated it like something precious. She had learned to play by practicing every evening after finishing her schoolwork. Sometimes the strings hurt her fingertips. Sometimes she made mistakes so many times that she wanted to cry. But Mrs. Rowan always reminded her that music was not about having perfect hands. It was about having something inside you that needed to be heard. That afternoon, Elara had hoped to perform for the charity guests. She had practiced one particular piece for weeks. It was a gentle melody Mrs. Rowan had written for her before becoming seriously ill. Elara had promised that one day she would play it in front of a large audience. Unfortunately, nobody had put her name on the official performance schedule. So she waited quietly. Adrian eventually noticed her near the fountain. At first, he saw only a child holding an old violin while wealthy guests stood around him. One of his business partners made a comment about the instrument looking like it belonged in a museum. Adrian laughed. Then he looked at Elara and, without thinking about how his words might sound, said, "If you can really play that thing, maybe I'll adopt you." Several people laughed. Elara froze. The words were meant as a joke, but to her they were much heavier than everyone realized. She had spent years wondering what it felt like to have someone choose you. She had watched other children leave the home with families while she remained behind, pretending she was happy for them. She had learned not to ask questions when someone came to meet another child. She had learned not to hope too much. Now a wealthy man had turned the thing she wanted most into a joke. Her eyes became wet, but she did not cry. Instead, she walked toward the stage. Adrian expected her to refuse. He even started to turn away. But then he heard the first note. The garden slowly became quiet. Elara lifted the violin beneath her chin and began to play. At first, The melody was soft enough that people had to stop talking to hear it. Then the notes grew warmer and stronger. There was something unusual about the way she played. She was not trying to impress anyone. She was simply telling a story without words. The melody carried the loneliness of a child waiting for someone to come back. Then it seemed to change into something hopeful, like sunlight appearing after a long storm. Guests stopped eating. Conversations ended. Even the waiters stood still. Adrian turned around. The expression on his face changed completely. He had heard world-class musicians perform in concert halls across Europe. He had paid enormous amounts of money for private performances at his home. But none of those performances had made him feel the way Alara's simple music did. Then she played the final section. It was the melody Mrs. Rowan had written for her. Alara's eyes remained closed as she played, remembering the old teacher sitting beside her during their first lesson. She remembered being told that one day her music might reach someone who desperately needed to hear it. She remembered Mrs. Rowan saying that being forgotten did not mean being worthless. When the final note faded, nobody spoke. For several seconds, the entire garden remained silent. Then applause erupted. Alara slowly lowered the violin. Adrian did not clap immediately. He stood completely still, staring at the child he had embarrassed only minutes earlier. For the first time in many years, his enormous wealth felt meaningless. He approached the stage, but Alara stepped backward. Adrian stopped. He understood why. He had hurt her. Instead of making another joke, he quietly apologized. He told her that what he had said was wrong and that she deserved to be treated with respect. He did not ask her to forgive him. He simply admitted that he had spoken without thinking. Alara looked at him for several seconds before nodding. That evening, Adrian learned the story behind the violin. He discovered that Alara had been living at the children's home since she was very young. He learned that she excelled in school, helped younger children with their homework, and spent most of her free time practicing music. But he also learned something that troubled him. The children's home was struggling financially. The roof needed repairs. Several classrooms needed new furniture. The music program was close to being cancelled because there was not enough money for instruments or teachers. Adrian could have written a check immediately. Instead, he visited the home the next morning. It was a bright daytime visit. Children were playing outside, teachers were organizing books, and Alara was sitting beneath a tree with her violin. When she saw Adrian, she looked surprised. He did not arrive with cameras or reporters. He came alone. Adrian spent the morning listening. He spoke with the teachers. He looked at the classrooms. He asked the children what they needed. And slowly, something inside him began to change. For years, Adrian had believed that helping people meant giving money. He had donated millions without ever learning the names of the people receiving it. He had thought generosity could be measured by the size of a check. Alara showed him otherwise. Sometimes kindness began with simply staying long enough to listen. Adrian created a new foundation to support children's education and music programs, but he made sure the program was managed transparently and that the children's home remained independent. He arranged scholarships for children who wanted to study music, repaired the building, and helped provide instruments and qualified teachers. But there was one thing he refused to do. He refused to turn Alara into a publicity story. Months passed. Alara continued practicing. Adrian continued visiting. Their relationship slowly became one built on trust rather than money. He never again made promises he could not keep. He never treated her like a charity photograph. He simply became a dependable adult who showed up when he said he would. Then came the day of Alara's first major school concert. The auditorium was filled with families, teachers, and community members. Alara stood backstage wearing a simple navy blue dress, her hair neatly braided, holding the same old violin. Adrian sat quietly in the audience. When Alara walked onto the stage, she looked toward him. He smiled. She began to play. This time, her music was stronger. She had grown more confident, but the heart of the melody remained the same. When she finished, the audience stood. Adrian was among them. But Alara was not playing for applause anymore. She was playing because she had finally discovered that her voice mattered. After the concert, Adrian approached her and told her that Mrs. Rowan would have been proud. Alara smiled and said that she had once believed nobody would ever choose her, but now she understood something important. Sometimes family was not simply about who you were born to. Sometimes it was about the people who chose to stay, care, and earn your trust. Adrian looked down for a moment, remembering the careless joke he had made months earlier. That single sentence had begun as cruelty disguised as humor. Yet the lesson it gave him became one of the greatest lessons of his life. Money could buy a mansion, a car, a private concert, and almost anything else he wanted. But it could not buy the sound of a child's honest music. It could not purchase trust. And it could never replace the simple power of showing up for someone who needed you. Years later, Alara would become a talented violinist and music teacher, dedicating her life to helping children discover their own voices. She never forgot the old violin, even after receiving a beautiful new instrument. She kept it carefully displayed in her home because it reminded her of where she began. And Adrian kept one photograph in his office. It was not a picture of his mansion. It was not a picture of a business award. It was a photograph of Alara standing on that little garden stage, holding her old violin beneath the bright afternoon sky. Under the photograph, he had written a simple sentence: "Never joke about someone's greatest hope." If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. Your support helps these stories reach more people who may need a reminder that compassion can change a life. And before you leave, comment, "Kindness deserves a second chance," if you believe that one sincere act of kindness can change someone's entire future. Because sometimes the person standing quietly in the corner is carrying a gift the world has never heard before. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one who teaches us the greatest lesson. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment of kindness, one honest apology, and one person willing to stay to turn a painful beginning into a beautiful new chapter.